Not that long ago, I met a young veteran who was what many people think of when they stereotype veterans. He enjoyed hunting, and he enjoys fishing, and he drives his truck, and he would talk about firearms with a lot of knowledge and comfortability. But what really did catch me by surprise was the fact that this young man was also an active and avid environmentalist. In other words, he would talk with the rest of us like if we didn't believe in climate change and the dangers to the environment as a real and present danger to the United States and to us, we were out of our minds. And why? Because he had seen its impacts firsthand. And this led me to think, what am I missing here? And so I did some research on veterans and environmentalism, and you'd be surprised how many veterans really believe in climate change as a problem. In fact, 72% of veterans in a 2023 study said that climate change was a very serious threat. So what is it that we're missing? Well, here's the problem, is not only is climate change a serious threat, it disproportionately impacts veterans. Veterans who have had, say, respiratory issues and other physical ailments, when there are environmental health problems out there, they are more likely to be impacted by it. So this is a fact that conservatives, while they're gutting the Environmental Protection Agency and while they're gutting the VA, are completely ignoring. But it isn't just conservatives who are the problem. Liberals, Democrat politicians often don't engage with veterans. They're not talking with them. Sometimes they even seem like they're looking down on them. And this is a group of people who knows what these problems are firsthand and whose voices should be respected and heard. Welcome to Philosophy All Along. I'm a professional philosopher, and I like to use the tools of philosophy to help me understand things on a deeper level. There's a lot of stuff out there that service members have seen that might cause them to think about the environment in ways that most of us have never even considered, like the burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan, where the military was disposing of electronics and plastics by burning them in open air pits that these service members were breathing in. It caused numerous health problems for them. An example that comes to my mind is the use of Agent Orange in Vietnam. One of my uncles got cancer as a result and had to have part of his foot cut off because of his exposure to this chemical that was used to help clear forests and has been shown to be decimating in its impacts on our service personnel. The Camp Lejeune water contamination issue that happened, where this contamination has been shown to be causing cancer still in veterans. Now, one thing that we aren't talking about is the fact that these health issues are things that veterans need support for, often can't get, and now we're even actively cutting the VA and cutting their support. But in addition to that, their voices on these issues are unheard. We hear virtually no one listening to them when they talk about the fact that we really can have a negative impact on our environment. One place where it seems like veterans can go to be heard and to have their voices heard is conservative media. The conservative world in general seems to show tremendous respect for veterans, for service personnel, appreciation for what they do. And it tends to be a place where a lot of veterans feel like they at least are acknowledged for their service, for their bravery, and for their sacrifice. But at the end of the day, the problem is we also know that these conservative voices, that these politicians are doing nothing to actually serve veterans. And so veterans have been caught in a bind in dealing with this. Where can they go to make the change and to engage in the advocacy that they clearly think is really important? And the problem is we don't even think about how often things like PTSD are not taken seriously, and the impact that the anxiety of having to worry about environmental issues and having to worry about their health, how people who are already struggling with something like post-traumatic stress disorder, having to have those anxieties piled on top of it, how important that is. And so we as a country are failing our veteran population, but we are also not supporting a tremendously valuable resource by ignoring them. And this is not to say that there are no opportunities for veterans to talk about these issues. There are advocacy groups. They are growing in voice and power. I'm going to make sure to post those in the descriptions on this video. But the fact of the matter is liberals especially should be making a massive change here and should be really checking themselves, because we constantly talk about being advocates and being voices of inclusivity. But where are we really listening to the people who are there on the ground, who have the experiences that really could be helping make a difference and be helping reach out to voters who maybe are less likely to listen to, college professors and the supposedly liberal elite, but they're more likely to listen to veterans who they know have actually had those experiences. So we should be reaching out to them, not adding to their feeling of exclusion and to the feeling of being ignored by their society. So we should be actively seeking out veterans and veterans' voices and veterans' experiences, because it really is there. The impacts of climate change affect them on a harsher and a deeper level than for many of us, because of things like their PTSD, because of things like respiratory issues, but they also are the people who have seen it and have a voice that we should be listening to and respecting. And the tendency amongst liberals to just kind of ignore not just veterans, but military personnel, but also the working class in general, is not just a problem that's being made up by the right. The fact that Donald Trump makes people who are in that working class world, in the blue collar world, in the military world, feel heard, even though he does nothing to actually support them, is something that should be ringing bells for liberals who say that they care about these issues. And they certainly are the ones with the policies that are in more alignment with supporting them. But our voices are not in unison in our support and in our willingness to listen. The simple fact of the matter is in every facet of their actions, the Trump administration fails to meet the needs, not just of veterans, but I think of the goal of the military as a whole, to protect our country. I don't really have a right to talk on these issues as if I know. I am not a service person. I have never been out there. But I do know that our military is there to protect our country, the Constitution, its citizens, and each other. And I want to think about and focus on that idea of serving and protecting each other for a moment. This is something that I think is evident even to people who are not in the military and who have never served. We know that there is a tremendous amount of loyalty and support from members of the military to other military personnel. And I think that it is very clear that the Trump administration is trying to turn not just us as citizens in general against each other, but is trying to turn the military against itself. You see people like Pete Hegseth firing people, trying to make politicization out of the Pentagon. But we also see it in terms of putting the VA in a place where it's being forced to abandon and betray the people that it's supposed to serve and protect, veterans. And so whilst they turn our country against itself, they, the billionaires, the people in power, are free to pillage it. And it is obvious to me, and I think to many of us, that we share the same goal, whether we're liberal or we're more conservative, whether we're veterans or we're currently serving, the same goal of wanting our country to flourish and thrive. And to be honest, I think most of us also want to see the world doing the same in general. We need to recognize the experience and the power that each of us brings to this conversation, to this battle, and to stop ignoring the voices of experience and the voices of those who are suffering the most at the hands of environmental damage and climate change, and instead of ignoring them, amplifying them. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you liked it, please like, please subscribe, please click on that little bell to get notifications. If you disagree or have something to add, pop it in the comments. I love to talk with people about these issues. Appreciate you listening. I hope to see you again. Thanks so much.